Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and D.C. Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. I'm so delighted to have Lenora Howze, who is the Executive Director of The Afro, the oldest African-American owned or Black-owned business newspaper in the country, and some other notable things as well. But I'm delighted to have Lenora here to talk about The Afro and the role in the community. So welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm so glad to be here and so glad to be able to share with your audience all of the exciting things that happen and are happening at the Afro.
And it's a lot. We were talking before we started about just how much the Afro does, from events to Facebook Live to the printed publication to being active in the community. So let's start there. Tell us about the Afro. If someone does not know, and shame on them if they don't, if they don't know the Afro, tell us about the publication.
Certainly. Well, first of all, if you happen to not know about the Afro, visit afro.com and you will learn all about the Afro and our rich history and our rich present. And so one thing that I do want to clarify in the event that this podcast lands on the ears of our friends in Philadelphia. So there are other Black newspapers who are older than the Afro. The Afro's distinction is that it is the oldest Black-owned, family-owned as well, continuously published publication. So for 131 years, the Afro has never missed a publication. So I mentioned—
That's mind-bending.
It really is. I can't even when I say it, I can't really wrap my mind around the significance of that. And I mentioned our friends in Philly because the Philadelphia Tribune actually began publishing prior to the Afro, but there were breaks. I don't know how long the breaks were, months, years, date, whatever, but they weren't continuously published. And so that is quite a prestigious place and title to have, and I'm really proud to be a part of the Afro. Again, 131 years is unimaginable, but what's even more unimaginable, Rebecca, is that the Afro was founded in 1892 by a former enslaved man who, at the age of 52 and with 10 children, decides that in an era when many Black people either weren't reading or it was illegal for us to read, he decides to start a publication.
Right. Well, and I think that just speaks to such a commitment to the community. And I feel like that has, if you've never missed an issue, which is, high achievement in itself, but talk about that commitment to the community, because it's not easy being family owned. There's drama, there's issues, there's people being actually appropriate for the role of leading. You can't just hire someone else if you're family owned sometimes. Can you talk about what the Afro means to the Black community in Maryland? And you also publish in DC, so in sort of the wider area.
Sure. And thank you for that question, because I think it's important for people to know that the reason and the purpose that John Murphy Sr. founded the Afro 131 years ago still remains our purpose and still remains our goal. And that is the commitment to the community, commitment to educate, to inspire, to inform, to give African Americans a place and a platform that, especially then, we didn't have, and even to some degree now, we don't have. And so the Afro is committed to being that publication, whether it's print, digital, and all the other things that we do that we'll talk about. The Afro is committed to being that trusted voice, telling some of the same stories that our readers and our audience hear from other media outlets, but telling it from a perspective that traditional and quite frankly white media outlets may not be able to do. And so we absolutely have that commitment, and it's been going strong. I'm also happy to say that yes, it's family owned. I'm not part of the Murphy family, but are the fourth generation leader of the Afro is our highly esteemed publisher and CEO, Dr. Frances Tony Draper, as most people know her. And she has really just helped to turn the ship around because, newspapers in general have seen some troubling times.
Sure.
And there's a saying, Rebecca, that when America gets a cold, Black America gets pneumonia. And so, if
Absolutely.
newspapers in general were having a difficult time and still are, we really had a lot of challenges, particularly at the time that Dr. Draper came on board, and under her leadership, really turning it around. So it's been the Afro's been fortunate to have really good members of the family steering
Mhm.
the ship.
Absolutely. And I want to get into some of the things that you've done, like the Word in Black project and so forth. But before, I get totally off track, tell me what kind of differentiates you from other Black owned newspapers and in your focus, and what you're really doing today. What kind of offerings the publication has.
Sure. How much time do we have? No.
I know, I'm like looking at my clock.
No, because and I'm glad to say, we do a whole lot. And I think that is one of the distinguishing factors between the Afro and some of our other member newspapers is that, we're not just a newspaper. We're certainly not just in print. We're not even just a digital newspaper, but we are event producers. We are live program producers. We host major events, a couple of which you're familiar with. The high tea that the Afro host every spring, with the exception of when COVID hit, has become the Baltimore area's most highly attended, most highly coveted ticket.
Oh,
And
it is. It
everyone,
totally
every
is. I love the
yeah,
high tea.
oh, you come, you wear your fancy hat and your gloves, and we always make it not just about the gathering, a multi-generational gathering, because in some cases it's the first time that people who bring their grandchildren get to experience something like a high tea. But we also always have a theme or a message that we can leave with the community with the tea. This past year, the theme was honoring Maryland's leading ladies. And
Mhm.
we were honored to have First Lady of Maryland, Dawn Moore, there and honored. The Lieutenant Governor, Aruna Miller, was there and was honored, as well as Brooke Miller, the comptroller. And so, it's not just an opportunity to come together in high fashion and have fun, but it's also, again, it's with a purpose and with a message. And so we do that. And I would venture to say that with us producing the number of events and products outside of our print and digital editions, I think that is what distinguishes us, because there's always something. In August, we have 2 events, and we're doing something that really you don't hear of often, if at all. And we are honoring what we're calling the unsung first responders, and that is
Hmm.
the Black-owned funeral directors,
Right.
because of the role that they played, unfortunate and as sad as it was, in getting families through the losses of COVID.
Hmm.
And then, August is Black Business Month, so we are having a Black Business Month networking reception. So again, I can go on and on, but I think because of the diversity of our product and our portfolio and what we do and what we offer, that helps us to stand out a little bit more above the rest.
Well, and I think it's so interesting when you look at sort of the Black community. Of course, that encompasses business owners, first responders. It's a really wide and diverse community, and I think with the lens that you're approaching it, you can do more things than say, you're not simply a business publication. You're not necessarily a community, only a community
Hmm.
publication. Your lens is very unique, I think. And, you know, the high tea always is. I was so disappointed to be out of town this year.
We
When I
missed
went
you.
last year, I mean, just the vendors that you have, the people that you bring together. It is, and that's just one of the events. And I know that was one of your first place wins at the MDDC contest awards this past year. Um,
Yes, thank
and
you.
before we got started, we were checking out like what notable accomplishments do you have? Because the MDDC contest is a big deal. But I
Mhm.
was it was interesting to see that you have a lot of diversity in the awards that you've won. And I know the Black Press conference was just maybe last month, and
Few
you
weeks ago.
I'm sure you
Mhm.
took away some winnings there. But you won with us. You won things like best interactive media, best event, features video, editorial cartoons. And I remember your editorial cartoonist came with his family to our event, and he was such a like he's been around for a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
He obviously has a lot of insight, but I feel like the people that you gather together at the Afro are really unique. So like your cartoonist, tell us a little bit about how someone like that sort of has worked with the Afro and how that strengthens where you're going.
Yes. Yes. Mr. Kofi uh, predates me by decades in his work with the Afro. Um, and it's so um inspiring to have his insight, and to have him as part of our team. But I think the other thing that makes our team so unique is that it is so multi-generational. So we
Mhm.
have, the decades long team members like Mr. Kofi. We have our production manager, our director of community relations, our production manager has been there for over 40 years.
Mm.
We have one of our circulation representatives also over 40 years. So we go from that, and we've got some 20-year employees, and then we have a whole new group of young, bright journalists that have joined our team. So if you were ever to peek into one of our team calls, it's a very interesting conversation and dialogue, because we've got the Gen Zers represented, we've got the millennials represented, and I think they're probably the Gen Zers and the millennials probably make up the majority of our team at this point. But
Mhm.
then again, we go all the way to 40-year, several decade employees. And so it really is good to get the perspective from so many different generations. And I think that helps to lend itself to the work and the content and the things that we produce.
Sure. I mean, now correct me if I'm wrong because I could totally be getting this incorrect, but I feel like Tony has hosted the Chicken Box for many, maybe not years, but that's been like, is that a Facebook Live situation? But I feel like that just speaks to kind of the how the Afro reaches out to their constituency in whatever channel, whatever platform to be relevant and cool. And you guys like your Afro t-shirts are on fire. I mean, like it's one of those things like you look like you're hip and cool and
Yeah.
know what's going to resonate with the community. And
And
is
we're
that
having
kind of a
fun.
factor of your mix of staff?
Yeah, and we're having fun doing it. I mean, everyone on the team really has a passion for the Afro, has a passion for what they do. So yes, the Chicken Box is one of our online programs. It's actually live every Thursdays at noon. The name of it is derived from a very popular lunchbox treat in Baltimore, which is four wings and a fries. That makes up a chicken box for those who don't know that. But you are correct. Dr. Draper, who, our publisher and CEO, her son, so he's fifth generation, and I hope I'm not getting these generations wrong, but they'll correct me later. He is he is also one of the co-hosts, so he represents a different generation. And then we have a Gen Zer who also, so there's three regular hosts, Dr. Draper, Kevin, and Courtney Alexander, and
Mhm.
she represents the Gen Zer. So you're right. That's, we want to take advantage of every opportunity and every platform there is to reach our audience and not with just with news or even just entertainment, but with a variety of topics. And that's what the Chicken Box does. It's set up in a versus style. So we have had guests all, representing healthcare, financial industry, entertainment. Stephanie Mills was a guest on one of our shows. And so we just, we run the gamut with the different topics that we will discuss. And I think that's the other thing that makes us unique.
Yeah. Well, because it is, it's opinion, it's information. It's not just like here's the news and your vegetable. You're also getting those fries, which is
You're getting,
always key.
there you go. I
um,
like that.
and well, and so it made me think when you were talking about how you use the chicken box and Facebook Live to kind of reach a wider community that may not be realizing that they're kind of working with a legacy newspaper
Hmm.
and a news organization. They might just be thinking that's great, fun content. But I think that it's been really innovative that the Afro has teamed up with Word in Black. I think you're one of the founding
Hmm.
publications
Hmm.
to use that. Um, and I think it also just speaks to the collaborative nature of a lot of Black owned publications, which is more, where my experience lies, and Black owned businesses. You're collaborating for the community. So could you
Yes.
tell us about Word in Black and what you're doing and how it's going?
Sure. And so, as you mentioned, the Afro is one of the founding, I believe, 10 newspapers of Word and Black. It is Word and Black. It is a journalism collaborative that where we share news and we share content and we promote each other's content. And so the Afro was part of the first cohort. There are now, and I don't know the exact amount, Rebecca, but there's now another cohort in place where more papers have come on board. But I think that what makes Word and Black special is because of that collaboration that you just mentioned, because we all ultimately have the same goal, and that is to make sure that news and information for and about our community is front and center, is easily accessed. And so to be a part of it, for the Afro to be a part of it, is just, again, another point of pride that, we were selected to be a founding member, a founding newspaper within the group of other publishers for the first round. So, and if people want to, it's wordandblack.com. If people want to see the collaborative work, but we also host on our site stories from Word in Black. And
Hmm.
so it's a great community of like-minded and with similarly gold publishers.
Now, has working with sort of national projects like Word in Black sort of affected how you approach your work on the day to day? Because when you're collaborating, it's not just, like let's share stories, but are you, is it impacting how you see your work or how you're approaching it in some way?
That's an interesting question, Rebecca. I think that if anything, it's broadened even more our perspective. The Afro has always covered local and national news. But
Hmm.
this helps us get more insight into what's happening in other cities. And so, the Houston Defender is one of the other founding publications. And I believe when it was the hurricane, or there was some event that happened in Houston, we were able to, get firsthand reporting as a result of our collaboration. So it helps to
Okay.
broaden what we are able to know about and engage with and offer to our readers. But even before Word in Black, and I think it's important to note, the Afro is a member, and was and still is a member of the NMPA, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which is in essence the Black Press Association. And
Mhm.
and there's nearly, I believe, 200 papers who are members of that. Just coming back from that conference and seeing all of those publishers come together again with, similar or like-minded goals and like-minded engagement. It was really just good to be in that community. And in fact, the conference took place when the decisions from the Supreme Court came down about
Mm.
affirmative action. And so it made it even more emotional, I guess, Rebecca, to be with these publishers who, many of whom are coming from, generations before them, who struggled to have a
Right.
voice and to have a presence, and to have that decision come down during the conference sort of, made I certainly my understanding of how that impacted us even greater if it
Mhm.
had than it would have been if I had heard it outside of that collaboration. And so I think that's what, Word in Black and NMPA does for us. It helps us to broaden the way we see news and the way we gather news and information.
Which I think is so critical, and you in turn kind of pay that forward. And I feel like we could talk for hours, Lenora, but we are coming up on our time, so maybe we'll have you back again at some point. But you know, the point of view that the Afro carries throughout your work and in the community, I know you all are moving to you're housing your archives in a new space,
Mhm.
you're moving to a new building, and I know that also researchers and journalists are starting to look to the archives of Black owned newspapers to recognize that there's a different point of view. The mainstream news that is maybe being reported, like when the University of Maryland reported on lynchings throughout the state, and we found some really unpleasant things about our own Hall of Fame and had to address those.
Yeah.
A lot of that primary research came through the Black press, and just uncovering those untold stories. And so I think looking ahead, I am just so eager and respectful of the way that you have carried your mission forward through from the very beginning through 5 generations and hopefully more, to inform and bring together the community. So as we wrap up, do you have any last words, anything you want our listeners to take away and know about the Afro?
Well, like I said, we covered a lot, and we could certainly talk for a lot longer. But I think we've hit on the highlights. Thank you for mentioning the archives, because that is also a very significant part. The archives fall under Afro Charities, but it is such a significant collection and curation of African history that I don't think can be found elsewhere. And so we are really proud that we are going to be housing that under one roof in the Upton Mansion. And the last thing I'll say, because I've been thinking about this generation, because I think I've messed it up. I think it's third and fourth generation. So Dr. Draper and Kevin and all of those in the family, please forgive me if I've gotten it wrong. But I think Dr. Draper's third, Kevin's fourth. But there are some fifth generation involved, so I know I've got that right. But thank you again for allowing us to have this platform and to tell the good news about the Afro, Rebecca. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lenora. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, at mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.